we are not producing good enough fruit. As hard as this is to hear, I do believe it's the point of the parable that Jesus is telling this morning. We are not producing the right kind of fruit. We might think of it this way. We all know that if you're driving your car and you got your phone and you're paying attention to your phone, not to what you're doing, not to the road or the people around you, we know that distracted driving is incredibly dangerous. So, if we were to think back on our history as a Christian community, what I might propose to you is that in some way we have been distracted. We're not focusing on the right thing here. We're looking at something and we have the wrong attention focused in the wrong place. Jesus is expecting one thing and we've been focused on something else. In this parable today, Jesus is specifically speaking to the elders and the religious leaders of the people. And he's offering one of his strongest parables that seems to be deeply disturbing to those who are listening. And what he's saying to them is a retelling of the story of all of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God likes creation. God desires creation to flourish and to be a good and a haven of goodness and life. And so sin disordered creation. But God's solution to the problems in creation wasn't to promise that someday he was going to throw away creation and simply take our souls off into heaven somewhere. That's not what God is trying to do. Rather, God wants to fix creation. Excuse me. He made it. He likes it. It's good. God made creation good, and so his plan isn't to throw it away. But when sin distorts creation, he then calls to himself a people. This begins with Abraham so long ago. And so Jesus is telling the story of a parable as a retelling, but in a new way, with new metaphors, a retelling of God's chosen people. Beginning with Abraham and all of Abraham's descendants. This is that image of the vineyard. He calls to himself and he creates for himself a community. And this community has one job to do. To bear fruit. But notice what happens with the vineyard's produce. A vineyard's produce becomes tasty, abundant wine. The vineyard doesn't hoard the produce. Rather, the vineyard sells the produce, gives the produce away so that all of the surrounding villages, the country, and the whole world can have its thirsts quenched. This is the role of a vineyard. This is what a vineyard does. So God called Abraham and Abraham's descendants to bless the world. This is exactly what he says. Genesis chapter 12. But as Jesus tells the story, what happens? The people that God had called to run his vineyard had turned away from their mission. They turned away from their vocation. And when God sends them prophets, these are the servants of God that the parable talks about. When God sends them prophets to collect the produce, to call the people back to their vocation of blessing the world and quenching the great thirst of the world with God's wisdom and justice, they beat and cast out and stone the prophets. And then Jesus says, God sends, the vineyard owner sends his own son. Now Jesus is speaking about himself. And it happens yet again. Over and over, God has tried to call his chosen people. Now, that's us. to producing fruit to bless the world. But we have been distracted and focused solely on personal holiness. Over and over, we've been told the whole point of being a disciple of Jesus, the whole point of being a Christian, is so that we can find personal holiness, so that we can struggle against individual sin. That's good. I'm not saying let's not be holy. I'm not saying let's go crazy and sin. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is the striving for personal holiness and striving against individual sin is the wrong focus. That's not the mission here. It's like distracted driving. If you're paying attention to your phone and texting your friends, that's good. But if you're doing it while driving a car, that's dangerous. If we as a Christian community have convinced ourselves that our sole goal and purpose is to get individually holy and to avoid personal sin, and that's it, we've missed the point. We've missed the challenge of this parable. Jesus isn't calling those tenants in his vineyard to personal holiness or personal excellence. He said nothing about them becoming better vineyard runners, right, or workers in a vineyard. It's not about their own personal flourishing. The goal here is that the vineyard, God's community, bears fruit to bless the world. That's the highest priority. And so if we let our Christian faith be reduced simply to how I'm growing in holiness, we've missed the point if we're not producing fruit for justice in the world. If the world is still broken, but we're focused on our own personal spiritual life, something is wrong. If the world still is burdened by injustice, inequality, prejudice, and violence, and we're worried about our own individual spiritual stuff, we've missed the point. We are called to produce fruit to bless the world, not just to be concerned about our private spiritual lives. That's good. Again, please don't leave here thinking I'm saying that your own personal striving for holiness isn't important. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm trying to say is the parables that Jesus has offered for the last 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago was a vineyard owner who went out in the marketplace multiple times to hire a worker in his vineyards. Last week was a vineyard owner commanding his 2 sons to go work in the vineyard. One said yes, didn't go. The other said no, but changed his mind and went. And Jesus asked, who did the Father's will? Well, the one who went. The one who went and did the work. The point being, it's not what we say that's the most important thing. It's not our own personal spiritual lives that's the most important thing. The goal here is, are we putting in the work? Are we bearing fruit for justice in the world? The world is broken, and we, the whole community of Christians, all of God's chosen people, we have a mission. And it's not just our own private spiritual lives. That's good. I know I'm repeating myself, I'm sorry. That's good, but it is not the highest good. We have been given a mission. We've been given a task to bear fruit. And the image of bearing fruit is nothing less than to work with God to help heal and fix our broken world. The fruit that we're supposed to produce is justice, peace, unity, and mutual understanding. This is what Jesus means when he calls us to bear fruit. If our own striving for personal holiness is important for that, which it is, that's good. But it's one step towards the greater good. The greater good is that we as a community help to work with God to heal our broken world.